let me first of all introduce what is coming next, because I sense what comes next comes exactly at the right moment. We heard the word governance so many times today, and we heard it yesterday. We heard the word leadership. We need a new way of governing ourselves. And Wayne, you highlighted this with one of the aspects of commons, maybe one of the most critical ones, which is digital media. So how do we establish new models of governance? How do we establish new formats of leadership that actually allow us to deal with the complexity we are facing right now? Nick, over to you, and I let you handle the question and the panel that is about to be introduced, and perhaps other stuff, please.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Pavel. And wow, yeah, I was really enjoying that flow. And yeah, we'll get into some flow in a sec. I'll just introduce myself first. My name is Nick Graham. I'm co-founder of the Weaving Lab, along with Pavel and one of my guests, Victoria, on this next panel that we'll be diving into around the evolution of leadership. So yeah, the Weaving Lab is really around new leadership. So leading through networks, through collaboration, and through embodying the new systems that we want to see, helping each other to embody and going on that learning journey together. I'm also a steward of the Transformations community, which is a community of eco-social sustainability action researchers. That's quite a mouthful. But yes, several thousand professors in sustainability. And there we see leadership, or transformational leadership, as primarily decentralized and participatory. So to dialogue with us, we are really blessed to have a rock star panel. They are rock stars. So we've got Mansi, Jasuja, we have Indra, Andan, and Victoria Haro, Diane Willams, and Steve Farell. And they can each introduce themselves much more eloquently than I can very shortly. But for anyone who's just joining, and I see we do have quite a handful arriving just now to join the many who have been on a long journey already. The overall context for the forum is really around this, the poly crisis that we're presented with, that we're sprinting towards so many cliffs. What could be optimistic and inspiring pathways for us, for our futures? How can we reconnect with our dreams, and how can we reconnect with the dream of the earth? What kind of new operating systems do we need as a society? Maybe new ways and maybe old ways as well of thinking, being, and doing, all in service to life. So yesterday was really about visioning, and today is more about action. So what can we do to bridge into the future? And yeah, to Pavel's point, maybe let's actually do some movement just to get into our bodies, just indulge everyone for a moment or so. And I just invite you to really settle into your seat and then just reach up, just have a nice stretch. You know, the previous session we were talking about going up. So let's reach up to the stars as much as we can, as much as you're comfortable. And then let's reach out wide. Can you feel the energy in your hands? Can you see the energy from other people? Can you sense the other people in the room as we reach out to each other? And then maybe let's reach back and have a stretch around the back. Let's go back to our roots and sensing into cultures past. And whatever stretch you need, but one last long and deep look into the eyes of the others, the beings in front of us. And thank you for that. I really needed that. I hope that was, it's nice to reconnect with our bodies. I want to invite anyone who's listening, the panelists as well. If you do have a burning question for this session, then please do type it in the chat. And yeah, we're wanting to explore this idea of the evolution of governance models, new management practices and leadership processes. So teal organizations is a framework that comes up, I found quite useful. I'll drop the link in the chat in a second, but broadly speaking, it describes the evolution from kind of impulsive wolf packs like the mafia to the conformist hierarchies and driven machines of corporations with incentives, to the perhaps more progressive kind of pluralistic families, organizations like IKEA, which place relationships and stakeholders at the heart of their ways of interacting. And then beyond that, I think we touched on this idea of the teal, the living organism, the evolutionary self-management practices with purpose at the center. But is sociocracy and holacracy, is it really just renaming teams as bubbles and circles? Or is it something a bit more meaningful than that? And I'm wondering if we can check into our panelists now, and maybe you could spend just a couple of minutes, about 3 minutes, just to introduce your work in relation to this topic. So how can the evolution of leadership guide our transformation? And I wanted to start with Mansi. Yeah, hi, welcome. And what does conscious leadership mean to you?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just calling in from the Netherlands, so it's early evening for me. I find it hard to just go straight into what does the parameters of my work mean without kind of telling a little bit of who I am and why I do what I do. So I'm just going to very briefly go into a little story of why am I here. And I grew up in India, in Delhi, with very strong values around justice and equality and equity, which is also part of my religion, Sikhism. So I also think I'm a bit of a warrior just by birth. And I have traveled the path of being a warrior of the heart since then, by starting to first rebel against a lot of the existing dualities or the things I saw in India which didn't fit with the stories and the narrative which was being told and didn't match. So I've been quite a rebel through cultures, through different organizations I've worked in, and finding over time, I studied architecture. I came to the Netherlands to do a master's in urban environmental management, joined my dream organization, United Nations, found out it wasn't my dream organization. I found a lot of problematic things in these larger organizations. I worked for many international NGOs and organizations, and I realized leadership as it was there didn't fit me. And I've been on this journey the last 2 decades, 3 decades on, so what does work for me? And that brought me in the path of conscious leadership, or a lot more actually participatory leadership. So I've been a practitioner of the art of hosting and harvesting meaningful conversations, which started to make a lot more sense when you started to see, that's why I did fit well in all of these other organizations. So for me, I'm also co-founder of Conscious Business, and it's recognizing business can do a lot more to this world if it will only start working beyond profit to include people, planet, purpose. And I think a business can only be as conscious as its leaders. So sort of marrying these two, participatory leadership. So, you talked about teal structures or sociocracy or horizontal structures. I think that's critical to any organization who wants to be conscious, and to any human. How can we not have the hero hat on, but how can we actually work with each other? And I'm just sort of in that discovery. I don't have all the answers. I certainly feel that. So I'm really happy to be here and learn from each other. I think that's good for now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, that essence of learning together and maybe feeling comfortable to not know is really critical, and it's important to leave with that. So thank you. Diane, I wonder if you have also, what's your sentiment around the UN and your experience there? And I would love to hear more about all of the amazing things that you've done and how we can help leaders tap into this collective potential.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Pavel, and everybody that helped put together this amazing assembly. And yes, I'm the president of the Source of Synergy Foundation, and I am the co-founder with Deepak Chopra of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. And I was just thinking when Mansi was speaking, they were really birthed out of my time at the United Nations, because I remember I was chairperson emeritus and founder of the NGO Committee on Spirituality, Values, and Global Concerns. And I used to do work at the UN in New York and Geneva. And I remember when I was at the Commission on Human Rights, I used to attend every year. And we'd be hearing kind of the worst atrocities you can imagine, and people weren't fully present. They were checking their cell phones, they were leaving the room. So I thought something is really missing in terms of leadership and how we engage with each other. And I thought the times that I felt like there was the most connection between people was when we brought together everyone in synergy. And it was more like a cooperative sharing experience, but everybody was taking leadership in their own way. Like one person would say, okay, I'll lead on writing this paper and I'll lead on doing this. So it was the small ways that we all led that made the collective so strong. And I think it was really that power of the coming together in synergy. So I think that's really my take on conscious leadership. It's really being very aware of how we interact with each other on a day-to-day level in our works, in our families, in our homes, and being very conscious. So it could even be something like random acts of kindness could be a way that we show our leadership. We see somebody that needs support, we help them, and studies have shown that when this happens, other people around that see that act of kindness, their mirror neurons actually start to form even more, and then they want to also do an act of kindness. So there's a ripple effect. So I think conscious leadership is not always exactly what we think. There could be many ways of conscious leadership.
Thank you so much, Diane. Yes, indeed. I believe we evolved to empathize because it's beneficial for us as well. So I'm actually would love to dig in a bit deeper into the conditions for that, and also curious if you had any experience of things that you tried that didn't work. So I'll just plant that seed for everyone on the panel actually to think about as I introduce the next panelist, Victoria. Welcome to the panel. Great to see you again. Where are you at on your evolution in exploring leadership?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Nick. Thank you, Pavel, for the invitation. I'm co-founder of the University of the Environment, Universidad del Medio Ambiente in Mexico. And I think what I would say on what's my present moment or something that we've been exploring at UMA, and hi, Alexander. Alexander Laszlo actually was with us at the very beginning of the UMA development. So he knows about this. UMA is a university that is trying to explore how a university can be a community of practice. So it's really a university that's convening professionals or about to be professionals to come and practice together and do action research together, and specifically around doing real projects. And we are trying to explore the different facets of co-designing projects as a leadership style. So that we are inviting everyone in this community of practice in this university to learn through co-designing projects and exploring what does co-design mean. And one of the I would say two principles that we're focusing on are the following. The first one is doing projects with others and not for others as the basis for co-design. And the second is Gandhi beautiful idea of the means are the ends. So how does the process of the project reflect what you want to, or the process of whatever you're doing, project or whatever it is, even a class, how does the process reflect that you're trying to achieve, and how does the process also provide conditions for exploring and finding out what is it that you want to achieve? So those two ways of seeing it. So I think that transforming our leadership styles into processes that are focusing on the process and not only on the results. And I'm saying very consciously, not only, because I don't like the idea of only focusing on the process either. So it's sort of focusing on both. So leadership that is focusing on both, and that is trying to explore co-design in the sense that, Diane, that you were saying, that creates that synergy, that brings that type of energy into the room, I think is very useful, or actual, not only useful, magical, and tremendously necessary for our collective transformation, because then the question of the collective transformation is not of the leader, it's actually of whoever is involved in the transformation. And I think that's key to the transformation itself. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Beautiful, yes, and I really resonate with this idea of the magic is in the process, but it's also a dance between the process and the outcomes. So bridging the old world and the new, perhaps. And on that tip, that also reminds me of, you triggered me around the decolonizing work that needs to go on around co-designing with rather than for or to or over, and also the expression of power there. And so neatly moving on to introduce Steve, and I'm very curious to hear about your transformation, and yeah, I'd love to hear the stories of moving from maybe exponential growth models to these new evolutionary models. Yeah, Steve, tell us about you. We can't hear you.
Myself unmuted. So yeah, thank you for inviting me. A very distinguished group here. So we founded Humanities Team, a 501c3 nonprofit 20 years ago in June 2003. Neil Donald Walsh, who's of course, author of the Conversations with God series, and myself, our focus is really narrow and deep. It's on actually conscious leadership. And our premise here when we talk about conscious leadership is really awakening at a personal level. It's an inside out job, of course, and then it goes collective. Awakening to this wisdom that we're all so incredibly familiar with in today's world. And the wisdom is that we're not separate at all. That actually all of us are not just a metaphor, but we're actually all a part of each other, right? That there's no separation. This Einstein quote from 102 years ago, that the greatest illusion in the world is this illusion of separation. Gosh, after 102 years, maybe it's time we really deeply understand that and live into that. And of course, that's then inviting us to live into this spiritual universe, that there's this universal consciousness or intelligence or loving presence that's animating all of life, and that our bodies are just tools, right? We all know this. And Humanities Team, of course, we're an educational platform. It's what we've grown into, supporting conscious leadership and conscious living. And so I work with mediums and near-death experience community. And of course, as we know, they describe this non-physical reality that we return to, this life review process that begins that journey, where the whole question or the whole process is other people like all of you observing me, what you're thinking, feeling, and seeing in me throughout my life. And that's the whole thing. And then at the end, the question is, so Steve, did you and God achieve what you wanted to achieve in this lifetime? And that kind of ends the life review. So if this is true, if this is how it works, and there's no separation and we're a part of each other and the earth is a part of us, and this is the whole process of how loving, how tender, how kind, how listening, all of these things, how much in service, if this is really the whole thing at the end of our life, why would we not now like live into the fullness of that, where it's not just taking classes and watching movies and things. We're understanding this is ultimate reality. We're exposing a false reality, that we're not separate at all, that we're actually a part of each other in the earth. And it's a spiritual reality, and our bodies are only tools here for this very short life that we're all living. So this is the work of Humanities Team. Education is the most powerful tool in supporting the transformation of humanity. So we've created hundreds and hundreds of video trainings and live programs. Some of you here have created programs for our Humanities Team platform. It's a subscription streaming platform. But for purposes of this program, the key question that I would ask, and that I ask myself every day, is, am I living into the fullness of who I really am? I'm not separate. I'm part of this spiritual universe. And am I in service in all the ways that I can be at this time of this great shift of humanity? Because I believe all of us are sons and daughters of the Most High, that we chose to be here now during this great shift, this pivot to conscious living, which the download we got is make conscious living pervasive worldwide by 2040, in 17 years. So it's wake up time and live into it time. And that's really what I'm about and Humanities Team is about.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's great to hear. It's really inspiring. And yeah, I would just like to open the doors to the panel to reflect on this idea of oneness. I feel like a lot of us on this call have that sense at various times in their life, and are also coming up against a lot of resistance in bringing that to their world. So yeah, I'm just curious if, thinking about what are the really deep underlying interventions, what are the conditions for those interventions that do lead to a shift in behavior, in mindsets, and it could be something that's worked or something that hasn't worked. So yeah, just wanted to start with Diane.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking right before this panel about how it's called this whole program is called the Evolutionary Renaissance Assembly. And the Renaissance in the Middle Ages was a period right after the plague, and there was a lot of suffering. People just wanted more light in their lives. So we saw so much culture, creativity, new music, art. Michelangelo created his greatest work during that period. So what does, now that we're in this era where it's the era of the evolutionary renaissance, what does that look like? So I think that's a collective renaissance, and that's what we're seeing. And your question in terms of what is it going to take, I really believe that what Nikola Tesla said, he said the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all previous centuries of existence. And I think that's what Steve was also sharing, because that means that we have to really cultivate some of our really innate capacities, like our capacity to be telepathic, our capacity to do intention setting. I was just on Lynn McTaggart. I don't know if some of you are aware of her work, but she brings people together and they make an intention. And she just did one for the conflict in Israel and Palestine, but she also does personal intention experiments where you're really seeing the person that's making the intention and the person receiving the intention. If somebody has a health issue, that they're actually healing. And it's quite miraculous how this is happening. And so really enhancing our non-local communication, this healing at a distance, I think this is what it's going to take for us to shift to the next level. But that has to be something that we teach our children very early in life, that they have this innate capacity to do this and evolve into this new being. I know our friend Barbara Marx Hubbard used to call it the new human, the universal, what did she call it, Steve? Universalis.
Universalis,
Yeah,
right.
universalis. So what will it take for us to have this, I know the subtitle is The New Human Dream Emerging. So how can we dream into this new person that we can all be, so that we can really be able to address some of these global challenges that just feel overwhelming. But I do believe that we have the innate ability to be able to tackle all of the challenges before us.
Thank you, Diane. And Mansi, do you resonate with that? Is there, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I certainly resonate with it. And what was coming up for me when I was hearing about the oneness was that I missed the nuance in the oneness, because I find that for me, interconnectedness seems to be much more what I'm feeling here, because I do love the diversity of the fact that we are all very different. You know, I would love to be a tree, but I was born as a woman, unfortunately. But I can connect with the tree a lot. And I love that the tree does what it does. Yeah, I'm a tree hugger. Absolutely. My children are very, very ashamed of that, but that's how it is. They'll grow up. And I love the fact that in this world, there's just so much skill and knowledge and beauty and magic. And what I love is like that interconnectedness of how we are one system. So the oneness for me is more the one system, not the one being, you know, maybe that together is one being. So that was sort of coming up for me. And when we speak about leadership, or if we speak about consciousness, for me, what really spoke to me was the being present thing, which I think Diane was speaking about. And I think that quality of being present and to be able to listen deeply to the past, to what's there now, and, you know, to what might emerge. Yeah, those are the qualities which I appreciate a lot, and which I think are what is needed a lot more in this world. Yeah. So I'll stop here for now.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to bring Victoria in and on that topic of ancestral wisdom. I wondered if there's anything that you've seen really working here, and again, just to nudge also if there's things that you've tried that haven't worked.
Well, just connecting to what Mansi was saying right now, I also think that this view of the unity in the diversity, in terms of the systems view, I actually like the ecosystem view. You know, like this, as we're very often saying, that we humans sometimes have to remember ourselves that we are nature, that we are part of nature, that it's not nature here and humans there. And so the metaphor of us being in an ecosystem, like planet, an ecosystem where humans are included, brings me to this idea of the power and the importance of the concept of evolution, the evolutionary part of what we're talking about here. And what Diane was saying about the name of this forum. And I think sometimes we do forget to relate to this ecosystem identity through one evolutionary lens. So, for example, we talk about a new leadership, like there was an old one and a new one, and there's a stark change, not only in leadership and a bunch of things that we're talking about. Systems change and change and change and change and change. So the word is change, and the word change, I think, at least in my perception, many times is pointing towards throw away the past and let's, you know, bring on something new, and then we disconnect from, no, we are in an evolutionary path, not always progressing, but certainly evolutionary. So it's connected, we connecting in time, not only in space, not only in this ecosystem that we are right now, but there's time here. And so what you were saying, Diane, about this Renaissance, I felt so inspired, because we're such in a very similar moment, aren't we? We're just coming from out of a plague, just coming out of a pandemic, smaller, by the way, than the one you were referring to, but certainly an important one that had a global effect that the other one didn't. So different things. But in any case, I for 1 or 2 seconds, I suddenly connected, like I was imagining while you were speaking, like a little film of that time and how it must have felt, like the sensation of, oh, we want to be born again, we want art, we want culture, and these things exploding and Michelangelo painting, and I was like, oh, for a second I felt, oh, I hope this happens now. Are we gonna, really getting to that Renaissance, and not as a change, but in this evolutionary process. These moments of Renaissance are beautiful and have come several times. So I hope we're in the threshold of one.
Yeah. And Steve, do you feel like we're at this threshold? Are we at a tipping point, a turning point?
I think so. And bringing in this Renaissance. So let's go back, like 100 years before the Renaissance, right? The Galileo moment there. So in 1610, thereabouts, Galileo learned about the telescope, which was invented by the Dutch. Mm-hmm. He was Italian, and he created his own telescope, looked up into the heavens, and he said, oh my God, there's a false reality we're all living into, right? And he said that was called this geocentric reality, that all of the heavens, the universe revolved around the earth. And he said, it isn't so, the earth and other planets are revolving around the sun. We're in a solar system at the edge of the universe. The universe is not revolving around the earth, which doesn't sound like it'd be terribly huge or dangerous, except that it was. Because this was the time of the Inquisition, and this was going against all spiritual and scientific prevailing beliefs. So he was put under house arrest, and then they were getting ready to kill him when he recanted and said, okay, it's not really true. But others had telescopes, and others said, no, it is true, actually, that the universe is not what we think it is. The earth is not the center of the universe. And the whole world changed because of this one man that put it on his shoulders and had a pretty challenging life because of it. So now what's going to spark this now? And I believe it's a Galileo moment again. But it's not one man that's going to do this. It's all of us, where we really deeply understand that we are a part of, whether we want to call it an interconnected, interdependent reality, or oneness, where it's like a hand, fingers on the hand, diversity and unity. But it's whether it's oneness or an interconnected reality. And actually, there's a lot of science, including Nassim Haramehn's science, that's affirming this whole unified field thing that Einstein was working on. And then again, you've got mediums and near-death experience. They're all really coming back to this aspect that the whole universe is one, and it's a spiritual universe, and our body is simply a tool as we go to the physical and then return to the non-physical and back and forth. So I believe this. It's a Galileo moment, except that it's even more important and more urgent now than in Galileo's time. That we expose this false reality, that we're not separate, and that the primacy of the physical, that it's about our bodies. Because as Dwayne Elgin likes to point out, when we think that we're just physical and we're separate, it's entirely appropriate to just gather treasure, unlimited treasure, and to have very little concern and be very little service to the world around us. It's appropriate. So we've got to start living into ultimate reality, the truth of who we really are. And honestly, I believe that for each of us, it's just a matter of how authentically, how fully, how honestly can we live into that. And it'll not be our words, but it'll be the embodiment of our truth. That is the thing that'll spread and that will create this grand shift that we're in the middle of now.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on. And I'm glad you mentioned telescopes. That's what I took away from. We need more telescopes. No, I'm joking. Better telescopes. No, still joking. We need, well, we do have these tools at our disposal now that with AI and all kinds of sensing, it's the collective sensing. You know, our friend Otto Sharma talks about bending the telescope back so that we can see ourselves, whether it's that view from space or from our collective view. So yeah, so we have these tools, and AI in itself represents perhaps a voice. And what are the voices? You know, how do we bring those voices to the table? We talked about past generations. We hinted at future generations as well. And then non-human agents, you know, we're pretty close to being able to communicate and sense with lots of other species. So how might governance and leadership include those voices of the voiceless? I wondered if anyone has any, just popcorn, if anyone wants to respond to that. Otherwise, I'll pick someone.
Well, I can share a little bit about that. Victoria was talking about ecosystems, and I think that's really important. I noticed on the chat there was a lot of discussion about that. And the United Nations, as well as many other groups, are talking a lot about the rights of nature, which is voiceless, but if we really listen, we do hear what nature is saying to us. Just to recognize that ecosystems and all precious life forms are not property that can be owned and exploited. Instead, they have a right to flourish. And I am sure some of you heard that 16 young people have won a lawsuit recently against the US state of Montana, which said that the state violated their constitutional rights, including their rights to health and safety, on the basis of not having clean air and water and a clean environment. So I think young people are really rising up. We see that especially with the environmental movement. It's happening all over the world. I think in terms of nature, it's a wonderful progress that people are thinking about protecting nature in this way. Nick, you mentioned other intelligences. I think we're at the cusp of going into another type of cosmic civilization, with many governments now saying that, okay, there's unidentified aerial phenomena out there. Pilots, members of the government are all sharing this. And before, it was they were shamed for speaking. But now, I know in the United States, we recently had 2 congressional hearings on this. So it's becoming more out in the open. And I think in terms of a renaissance, once we become really a cosmic society, a cosmic world, we will see many, many shifts. And so I think in terms of making sure we hear all the voices of the voiceless, we just have to really listen clearly to what they're all saying. Because like I said before, if we sit in nature, we hear from nature. Nature gives us support, it gives us comfort. So it's just listening in maybe a different way than we were raised.
Mm.
Yeah, I would love to put more emphasis on this, because I think a lot of the conversation on what you just said, Diane, because I think a lot of the conversations are around how do we give voice to the voiceless, but there's this step before, which is how do we listen? How could you give voice to, if you don't listen to it? And I, at least from my perspective, I don't see so much listening sometimes. I see more, assuming that the voice is saying this or is saying that without a real listening. Actually, many times, you don't even have to listen. You can bring the voice directly. And I see that sometimes the voice is not brought directly, but then there's people saying that we're opening the space for this voice, but then we are bringing the voice ourselves instead of being the voice directly. Of course, that won't happen with a tree, but with a lot of humans, that is perfectly possible. So I think that the listening part is something we can go deeper into in terms of what does that really mean, until the very obvious extreme of listening directly instead of reading or interpreting. So, yeah, just to put another line under that expression.
Yeah, I'd love to build on that. One of my favorite sayings these times is from Bayo Akamalafe, who says, when the times are urgent, we must slow down. And I think there's just so much beauty in that, in the slowing down and the pausing, because it's only when we do that that we can listen, right? Then we can be present and we can listen. I was watching this incredible video, slow motion, of a dahlia opening, this flower. And what it really does is that it opens, and then at some point it closes a little bit again, and then it opens again, like fully. And I wonder what's like the wisdom for us in that slowing down, closing again, and then opening fully. And for me, that pause, or that moment of looking back in, or turning the telescope back towards us, is where the magic is. And at a very practical note of bringing in the voices, one of the things I advise a lot of the business leaders I work with is, in your boardroom, put 3 empty chairs around your table. You know, one chair is for the voices which cannot be heard here, which could be nature, or the invisible voices, or the invisible stakeholders that you have. One is for your ancestors and the people who have been there before you, on whose shoulders you're standing. And the third is for the future generations. So I think in that very practical way of 3 empty chairs, which is not something I came up with myself, but it's wisdom I have gathered from other people. I think it's beautiful and powerful to be able to bring that in our work. But I think the most important thing is to model it, because it works like fractals, right? If we model it in our leadership, the listening and the being every single day in our family, around our table, around every interaction we have, and then I believe it's the practice of doing it at a smaller level, which then that's life works in fractals, and then it comes bigger and bigger. And I think the invitation I have for all of us here is, we need to model it. You know, we need to embody it. And it's not for somebody else to do, you know, it's for us every day, every moment. Thanks.
Could not agree more. Change starts with ourselves, and then we learn through this osmosis, through rubbing shoulders with people who inspire us. And I just wanted to presence how much you all inspire me, and I mean that very genuinely. Yeah, Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add around the voiceless?
I completely agree with where you ended that here, Mansi, which is that it's really, this is all coming back to us, you know, what is this for us, the voiceless, and how do we contribute? And what if we are being brought into that invitation, excuse me, in a huge way right now, excuse me, in the Middle East, with the Palestinians. And of course, we, our hearts are with Israel, these hostages that are still being held. And then just all of what happened, it's so horrific. And the Palestinian people, oh my God, what they've been living in for, when we talk about the voiceless, oh my God. Here is a community that really is an example of the voiceless in the hugest way, what they've been living with. And now, hopefully, we're not going into the eye for an eye and the whole world becoming blind. This is really where, this whole oneness thing and spiritual universe can really show itself. What can we do for these people to create a future for these Palestinians, that where they and their families excuse me, so sorry here, where they and their families can enjoy the basic food and shelter and medical care of life. So bringing that back to me, this is something I work on every day. I, in the humanities team, haven't drawn a salary for 20 years because I work with people, many that are volunteers, that need the income more than me. But there's much more that I can do. And I stretch into it every day. I was just on the East Coast. I got back last night. I took an Uber ride. And the woman that picked me up was in tears and was talking about her dad that just passed, her brothers, who's very sick, and just this horrific reality, living in her car. And of course, I was moved to, wow, how much can I leave as a tip for this Uber driver? They limit you to a certain amount. You can't give over that amount. But it's something that I'm stretching into every day. I haven't grown into the fullness of what I can be there. But I think this is all of our question, is how much can we give to those that are a part of us? How much can we give to the earth that's a part of us?
Yeah, and how much can we influence the systems so that it's beyond this this very helpful to be charitable, but then I think these underlying systems in Palestine or if where I feel like there's been a lack of listening for decades. So what's needed to shift into deeper listening and connection there? But if we look at the field of leadership in general, what do we feel is needed? What would be helpful in the next evolution, in the next steps that we take together? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I can share.
What would help you?
I think when Steve mentioned the conflict that's happening with Israel and Gaza right now, I know some programs like Seeds for Peace, where they bring together young people, Israeli, Palestinian young people, and they spend several weeks together and really get to know each other from a very deep level. And then it's, they're no longer somebody that you consider your adversary or enemy, but they're your friends. So you think differently. And I think really educating the younger generation in this way, giving them these experiences of oneness and union is really key. I think in terms of governance, we have to focus on collective intelligence and put the good of the whole first, and really have more citizen engagement in the policy process, and more public deliberations where people can help to share their thoughts, but also develop solutions together with the policymakers. So I remember when I was a graduate student, and Rudolph Giuliani was the mayor of New York City at the time, and they were about to throw homeless people out of their transitional housing. So some of us came together to complain about that and say, well, how could you do this? This is not humane. They have no place to go. And I remember, I'll never forget, the young man that was representing the mayor said, well, give me some solutions. And we were all kind of like speechless. And he said, well, come to my office, think about it, and come to my office, and then we'll talk about solutions, because we're really happy to hear from you. And we're also struggling with how to deal with this situation. So I think we all have to take responsibility for coming up with solutions and join with our representatives and share what we think. And I think models like consensus building and coming together and making agreements and not having us versus them, which we see so much in politics, but more like, okay, here's an issue, maybe it's a really hot topic, controversial issue, but what do we agree upon? How can we start from that place? And then we come up with solutions based on that. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And also Gandhi said, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. And I really believe that. So I think we're all leaders in our own way. Every single person, 8 billion people on, as Steve's organization is called, Humanity's Team, are all leaders. We just have to take the steps to activate that more.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Yeah, this feeling of listening, deep listening, comes together with not seeing our enemy as the other, but seeing them as human, and little interventions, whether it's music or dance or just walking together. Yeah, I'm reminded of the power of all of those little things that can all weave together. Mansi, was there something you wanted to share on this?
Yeah, I was, kind of, yes, I agree with everything Diane said. And I think it's, in my good days, I also believe that. And then there are days like I was in Delhi during the G20 conference, the G20 summit, which happened where the world leaders showed up. And we had our prime minister shut down the capital of India for 5 days and told the homeless people to disappear for 2 months from Delhi. And then I think, yeah, yeah. So it's there are days when I think, yeah, there's a lot of work needed to be done. And I think at the bottom of it is power intelligence, and our understanding of our own power, and our being conscious of how we are using our power. And I think that's the underlying work which needs to be done. Every leader needs to do that, understand where's our privilege, where's our power, and how can we use it generatively, because having power is not bad, but power over or power with, so that's where my thoughts were going. So maybe if you saw my expression, it was that's where I was.
Yeah, we were listening to your expression, definitely. And yeah, a nice question from Alexander in chat. Following on from that, what is the relationship between leadership and followership? If we're all leaders, then we're also all followers, perhaps. Yeah, I wondered if that question triggers anything in Victoria or Steve or anyone else.
Well, actually, it triggers something in me, because I followed this incredible course training by Ira Shalef on courageous followership. And if you haven't read that book, it's really beautiful. And Ira speaks with so much passion around intelligent discernment and also intelligent disobedience. And I think that's where we are at. And also what Diane was saying about all of us are able to make the change. And I think that's where, as follower, we might not be in the position of power, but we could still bring that as a follower, right? So that's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think many rebels in this crowd. So yeah, creating some energy for that to become a bit more mainstream. We've got about 5 minutes left. Just wanted to make sure that the panel have space to bring anything else that they wanted to the table. So if you do have something, Victoria, did you want to share something?
Yes, I would like to mention this idea of weaving as leadership, given that Nick, Pavel, and myself are co-founders of that fantastic weaving lab, the weaving lab, with this idea of lab, a space of experimenting with this style of leadership and of being, where the focus is on interconnecting. So what if leadership was about that, about interconnecting? So it's not, let's use collective intelligence as a means towards an end, but what if the means itself is the interconnectedness, is weaving the people together? So it brings this relational focus to leadership that I find very important in terms of these questions of transformation and evolutionary path. So and I particularly like the word weaving, because of course we could speak about other words, networking or connecting or articulating, but weaving, apart from just connecting and just giving this more intricate image, but it also has something to do with beauty with art, with culture. So that's all of these characteristics in terms of leadership, focused on the importance of process and interconnectedness. I think are beautiful in terms of speaking about weaving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Steve, what would you like to weave in? And you're still on mute, I'm afraid. Can you?
Muted. We have a conscious streaming platform. I think it's the largest conscious streaming platform in the whole world. We're, again, a nonprofit humanities team. We have hundreds and hundreds of transformational education programs and master classes. And the reason we have so many is because while there's one mountaintop, this love, this light, there are many paths actually to get there. So, and weaving is one of the programs that's on the platform. Suzanne Hubbard, who is Barbara Marx Hubbard's daughter, created a transformational education program on weaving, and how people together live our lives in this manner that brings us together and that creates this loving presence and service and tenderness and all of these things that we're talking about. So yeah, we're very inclusive. Again, just as we can see here, there are many different things that we resonate with. There are many paths to that common mountaintop. And our thing is just, let's get there in 17 years, because I'm a boomer. I've enjoyed an incredible life, but I work around and have kids that are much younger, and they deserve just something much more beautiful than what is happening right now, as we see the drumbeat of extreme weather, war, and these things happening. So that's what's most important. In terms of the invitation that I leave people with, of course, it all comes back to, what do we believe? Why do we believe we're here? I believe that we were all candles in the sun. That's what we are in the non-physical realm. We are pure love and pure light. And we wanted to not just know that, we wanted to experience that. So here we are, embodied at this time of this great shift, where there is darkness, a substantial amount of darkness around us. And it's not just knowing that we're the light and that we're love, we embody and express that. That's the whole reason that we're here. There's no grander moment to live into our truth and create a delicious life. First of all, I came from Silicon Valley, the land of financial wealth, private jet land. It's not there, I can promise you. I wrote a book about this. It's here. We're from any home in any region of the world where we live consciously. We live a delicious life. And all these things that we're talking about, we create together. This Malcolm Gladwell thing is true, right? At the 8%, it's tipping point, and we come into this whole new reality. And I believe we're on the path to that now. It just needs to spread further and faster. And that's really what it's about collectively and individually. It's just about if our essence, our basis is love and light, how can we each live into that as fully as we want? There are many ways to live into that, where we each find our own way and we embody that as well as we can.
Thank you, Steve. That's a perfect way to bring this to a close. I wanted to invite each of the panelists to maybe share an invitation in their closing thoughts. And just to mention, hi, Indra. Yeah, we're so sorry to miss you. We'll find a way to weave you into this conversation at some stage. But yeah, maybe if we start with Diane.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think if we just lead with our hearts and with humility and connect to the field that we're all part of, that we will definitely succeed. And I know Harvard, Steve just talked about the 8%, and there was another study too where Harvard University, a gentleman there conducted a study on movements. And every movement in the past, I don't know, maybe it was 100 years, that had 3.5% of the population succeeded very quickly. So I think that this movement for an evolutionary renaissance is totally possible, and I do have confidence that we will succeed in that.
Thank you, Diane. Victoria, you're unmuted.
Well, I think that there's a lot to learn in terms of setting conditions for weaving or having a leadership that's based on weaving from the ecosystems. That type of listening to nature, that type of listening to how is this done from just the ecosystemic point of view. So yeah, that's one inspiration that I think we still have a lot to learn from, and I'm very much looking forward to being part of this renaissance.
Yeah, it's great to be on this journey together. And yeah, closing word for Mansi.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say one of my main practices that help me stay present in my own self, being a learner, being curious, always being curious, and knowing that you can be either curious or judgmental, then stay on the side of curiosity. But also holding space for other people, other things, and only from there co-create. And I would also say just go hug a tree and listen. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to close, and passing the microphone from one curious rebel to another, to Pavel, and just a final thought around co-creation, co-sensing, and sensing into that oneness. And for me, that's the unifying field of love. So with love, I say thank you to the panelists, thank you to the audience, and hand over to Pavel.
Yes, thank you for this powerful panel. And I feel that this conversation needs to continue, especially because the breadth of opinions was present. Although we, in every panel, we try to see what emerges as kind of that attractor, that convergence point. There is also a divergence, which is evident. And yeah, I'm very sorry that we missed one of the panelists. There must have been some time zone confusion, which unfortunately happens in meetings like this. But Indra, thank you for being with us, and let's find opportunities to kind of weave you in also. Right now, I wanted to actually announce that we have a transition to the panel, which will maybe, Indra, before going there, maybe we would like to maybe just give you a couple of minutes to share what you listened to in the very end of the panel, and then we'll transit to the next one.
Gosh, I think that's, I'm very wary of being superficial because I didn't hear the whole conversation. But if you'll indulge me for a moment, that maybe I thought I was hearing that in the future, we will be able to converge into the space of love and light. There was a sense of feeling that this is something that is coming for us. Certainly my experience and my goal, I think, working as I do more in the social political field, that I'm maybe honoring very highly the importance of conflict and the importance of diversity and the importance of energy. Energy sometimes appearing as discord, or sometimes appearing as excitement, which leads to a sort of vulnerability. To me, this is the promise of being alive, that one has the capacity for all of this, that one really feels aliveness. To me, is not a comfort zone at all. It's a movement, a feeling of great movement, one that you can be up for. You have to build the capacity for it. But to be able to move from where we are today, in the middle of a war zone, in the middle of a environmental apocalypse, in the middle of the meta crisis, which tries to understand all of this, I feel the challenge is to be able to have, to grow the capacity for all of that, and to invite people into the into the growth journey. So that's really my kind of landing point, and that more than anything, we have to create space for people to find their own path and to find their own very individual kind of enlightenment. So yeah, for me, the more diversity, the more different forms of agency, the more different kinds of energy. It's not necessarily comfortable, but it has a lot of aliveness in it.
And actually, you really strongly resonated with the topic that was highlighted by Diane Elgin, who was talking earlier about the pathways to transitions to like new paradigms of economy and new paradigms of society. He pointed out to this feeling of being alive as one of our guides and our hopes. So thank you for bringing that back again. You didn't listen to Elgin in this session, but it was very, very resonant.
Yeah.
And thank you for your contribution. And I would like now to bridge to our next session.